All right, it's time for our launch week 10 wrap party. What an awesome week. Number of different announcements coming across Tailpipe, Guardrails, and Pipes, and a bunch of exciting updates in our B-sides across all of our products. Just going to kick things off. I'm Bob from Turbot, help run our sales and marketing. With me, we have Nathan, founder and CEO of Turbot. We also have John, who's one of our lead product architects, and Kai, one of our senior software engineers. Thank you all for joining us. Typical for these wrap parties, we're just going to walk through the week, talk about some interesting kind of back-end thoughts and perspectives of these new features that we launched. Kick things off, Monday, Tailpipe Day. We announced a number of big architectural changes as well as some new scopes that we landed in. So one of the big announcements was supporting the Ducklake format, as well as continuing to expand our cost analysis features from Amazon from last launch week to now also Azure and Google. So to kind of start off, Kai, why don't you give us some background on, with Ducklake, that shift is a major architectural shift for us. We were working with DuckDB, now moving forward to the Ducklake, so moving from Parquet to the lakehouse format. Can you talk through why the need for that shift and what does that look like?
Absolutely. So there's a few reasons why we wanted to do it. When it was first announced, we were really excited to see DuckDB developing that technology, which was something which really aligned with what we wanted to do. It's a product which is being actively developed. There's a steady stream of features and performance improvements that come through, which we can sit on the back of and we get for free, basically. So some of the things that it can do that we like, has much better partitioning of data. So it's more flexible in the way that we can partition data. We can partition data by function, which makes the querying a lot simpler. It's for schema evolution. It's transactional. So when we're converting to Parquet, we're just dealing directly with reading those Parquet files. When we're using Ducklake, we're now going via a database. And so we have transactional access to that data, which is, it's good for error handling. It's good for resilience and data quality. There's readily accessible metadata via a SQL database, which makes that a lot easier at the moment. Again, we're having to do that manually. And it sets the stage for, if we do want to move Tailpipe to Pipes, there's cloud native access to data, which means we can use object storage to store the data as well as local storage. And the metadata database, it supports various platforms, some of which support concurrent access, which is one of the limitations of DuckDB, is that you can only access it from one user at a time. You can use, Postgres, for example, for your metadata database, which is really powerful. So yeah, there's a whole package of features that made it, it was a big change and a lot of work, but we feel it's definitely been worthwhile.
That's great to see us kind of supporting the latest as part of DuckDB's architecture, and excited to see that in the progression we might go forward with Tailpipe and Pipes. One of the other announcements was around us moving forward with cost analysis in Azure and to Google cost billing usage and insights. How do you see Tailpipe kind of expanding its use cases beyond just the security and SIM type of analysis?
Look, the great thing about Tailpipe is really it's just so powerful for any type of a log, right? And logs, really the key common attribute of them is that they have a timestamp. We kind of see Tailpipe as being fantastic for any timestamp driven data, and billing is very timestamp driven. So FinOps use cases often come down to that. What was my spend over time? How did it change this week compared to last week? And all that data is always collected from the cloud providers in a timestamp based way. Lots and lots of rows with numbers that DuckDB and Ducklake just eat up and make it so easy to query. Super fun if you play with it with an MCP server or with chat as well, where you just start asking questions about your bill. It's just fun saying what changed about my spending compared to last week, and it starts running queries and working that stuff out. I think the community is going to take us in interesting directions, and I'm excited to see what they end up doing. Why wouldn't you maybe suck all your GitHub commit history in there and start asking questions about that, right? It's time-based data. Maybe all your Slack message history or other things, anything time-based is a fun and interesting question to start putting into this sort of collected log. So it's really easy to write a plugin. Someone put out a cool one for Kubernetes this week, which I was excited to see. It's very powerful, very modular, like Oling. And we found with Steampipe, people love building plugins. So think about your next time-based data and create a Tailpipe plugin and go nuts. It's sort of what I'm hoping to see.
You don't have to write a plugin. There's also custom
True.
capabilities of Tailpipe for custom tables that are based on JSON and such. So you don't even necessarily have to get into writing a plugin to explore data that's not in one of our published plugins.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it will be interesting to see where the community takes. Just like in SteamPipe, our focus is mainly on this like cloud dev, SecOps type of use cases. But then all of a sudden we get a weather plugin and a finance plugin, and Reddit and Twitter, etc. So use cases do definitely expand. Look forward to seeing that in Tailpipe as well. On Tuesday was a Pipes announcement day. A lot of it was centered around new enterprise type features, the new service account. There was token management. There was more workspace restrictions that you could set on the enterprise tenant. And then also we made some significant improvements on our performance for compute usage. So to kick things off for these set of announcements, John, what are service accounts? How does that differ from a Pipes user? If you don't mind just talking through what that is and then the use cases around it.
Service accounts versus users in Pipes is like they are anywhere, right? User is a human being. Service account is used by a non-human for automation and such. So, users can be synced from a directory. Service accounts are always created within Pipes, so they're separate from that. Service accounts are not tied to the lifetime of a single user. That's one of the biggest problems about using user keys for your automation, is the user leaves, their key's broken, and now you got to go find another key. The other thing is that in Pipes, users manage their own keys. You can't manage somebody else's keys. So having an admin team's ability to manage the keys of quote unquote service account would be limited. So now that we have service account, anyone that's an admin at the level where the service account's created, it has the capability to rotate those keys as well. So for non-human users, managed by the admins as opposed to a single user. The other thing about the service accounts is they can't log into the console. So they can have rights throughout the API and to query SteamPipe, but you can't log into the console with the service account.
Really coming from our enterprise customers that are kind of driving those requirements. Some of those features are or some of the requirements for the service accounts are coming through like more automated workflows that people want to embed those service accounts in.
We try to account for people being able to use Pipes at multiple levels, from an end user logging into the console to admin calling APIs or using Terraform to build and manage things, to people connecting directly to the SQL backend for their own automation. So, the service accounts are a kind of a natural way to give people programmatic access in a better way. But we see customers using Pipes and kind of connecting in at all sorts of different layers. And our approach has kind of always been to allow you to use it how you want and where you want.
Great enterprise customer feedback, and constantly last few launch weeks we've been adding more and more tenant level type of restriction settings or configuration settings to make that more flexible so that the organization can manage what their users can do within the tenant. What are those customer use cases on these backend features like token management or certain workspace restrictions like limiting AI usage or having more control over your session timeouts?
The joy of working in an enterprise is you get to navigate the complexity that enterprise chooses to put on itself to keep itself safe, right? And so, working with our enterprise customers for Pipes, large financials, whatever, they're trying to work out, how do I get this thing configured in a way which meets my enterprise requirements for that stuff? So it might be, I don't want access to the Postgres endpoint because we're not allowed to talk over that port in our company. So we lock it down to reduce the risk and something like that. I want more control over token expiration, right? And rules about how tokens work. So give them features to be able to do that. So really it all comes down to, with enterprise stuff, is giving them the chance to configure Pipes for the complexities that they require to meet their the way they want their enterprise to operate. And of course we're always trying to balance that with creating a safe and secure but easy to use initial experience, right? So Pipes are trying for that. You should be able to sign up, start doing things, but you've got the dials to turn if you need to really hit your enterprise level requirement for these features. We like it to work at different levels, accessible in different places. Like, a SQL endpoint to your database for querying your SteamPipe, that's a wildly valuable feature to have. You might want. On the other hand, you might want, chat, with AI features, which is, great feature to have as well. But You might be an enterprise who's like, we're afraid of SQL endpoints, or we don't want to have AI chat for our stuff. So you need the ability to start turning some of those dials appropriately, or you bring your own keys or stuff like that.
One of the other really impressive announcements was we had a 75% compute usage reduction. Super impressive. How did that come about in terms of optimizing pipes for that, and how in the post we talked about how it benefited everyone?
75% reduction of a specific case, to be clear, right? So the specific case that we ran into populating data tank table, and the job ran for a very long time, and we were seeing a lot of retries in the logs. So what happens is we get throttled by AWS, and we back off and retry, and we have an exponential back off, which is kind of like the way that you do things. The problem is once you get to a certain number, that back off interval gets pretty long, and we spend a lot of time waiting, right? So, and some of them wouldn't finish even. Like we would just basically run out of retries, and then you don't even have all your data, right? So we have this limiter capability that we added to SteamPipe a long time ago. In order to basically do rate limiting from the client side to smooth out the request rate. And we had always envisioned being able to put rate limits into the plugins to optimize the query experience. The challenge is that they're not published anywhere. So we don't know what they are. There's a lot of work and trial and error to get them right. And you have to have enough scale out there to even test it. When I say they're not published, it's not just that they're not published, but they're complex. So for some of them, for instance, there's a different rate limit for each region. So they're not just easy to just discover and populate a thing and just put them in the plugin. I wish they were, because then we could be a lot more efficient kind of generally. But so we ran into this specific case, and we were able to deduce reasonable rate limits, which once it smoothed out the request rate, made things run way faster, because we weren't waiting for the longest back off interval, right? And when when we talk about compute time for a running process like a data tank job, you pay for the compute time while that's running. Well, if running is actually just like waiting to get a response for minutes because you're on your last retry, that's still billable time, because we're still using compute up, right? So by smoothing a request rate, we don't have those big long backups, and we were able to shrink the time and make it much more efficient. That stuff makes its way back into the plugins, so that not even just in pipes, but in SteamPipe in general, we are more efficient. And we've had, I think Patrick Cat has also added some rate limits that he's found useful and everything. And so they're making their way into the plugins opportunistically, and they do. It makes a huge difference when you hit one of those tables at sufficient scale. So hopefully we'll continue to see those kind of contributions.
Great you called out Patrick. Yeah, it's great to see more coming from the community on helping us understand the right defaults for these rate limitations settings.
One of the fun things to dig into, by the way, if you're feeling like you want to nerd out on throttling and back off and everything, get into the AWS plugin sections where we deal with that, where we have our custom back off and retry algorithms and everything to give as fast as possible response, for small things, but also try to have a high guarantee of success towards the end. And so we could have an exponential curve, and it's quite interesting comparing contrast with Amazon's default algorithm, which is actually kind of random between a fairly small amount of milliseconds. So it might retry after 1 millisecond, and then retry after 30 milliseconds, and then retry after 5 milliseconds. Like, it's quite different, their approach by default. I enjoy nerding in that area of the code. It's fun.
A quick plug too. We've added these as defaults to the plugin, but you can always override them, and you can make your own limiters in your config file. So if you are running into issues and you think a limiter could resolve them, you can do this without changing the plugin using the limiter blocks.
Right. Another fun one I've seen is people who wanted to avoid detection, like while doing a they were doing a red teaming exercise, and they didn't want to get detected for scanning. So they would slow down the querying rate of SteamPipe through limiters to basically prevent themselves setting off the alerts for someone's trying to query all of our stuff.
So on Wednesday was a continuation of Pipes announcements, but we singled out a huge feature. Now we have a chat feature powered by AI behind the scenes, and it's front and center as your first experience within Pipes once you have connections set up. And so, the opportunity for me to start using it, doing some demos, taking some screenshots for our announcement post, complete game changer. As one that can do some SQL and can find joy in it, but also struggle with complex joins. Just using chat completely changes the whole experience. So I wanted to just touch upon the UX of this feature. And Nathan, if you can maybe just talk through like your own personal experience using chat, and then what you see the community kind of growing that and how the whole Pipes experience is changing.
Yeah, when we first dreamt up the idea of SteamPipe, which led to Pipes and the whole ecosystem, the question we started with was literally, what's the easiest way you could ask a question in your cloud? That was our goal. We settled into the idea of SQL and doing all of that automatically through the APIs. And I think we've done a great job of that, and it's proven by the success. But I'll tell you what's even easier, just asking an actual question of your cloud, right? You just literally just type in your question and it answers it. And, whether you're just trying to get that table of results out, which it'll do straight away in a really nice, easy to use, downloadable format, which is different from if you use a standard, one of the existing, but existing AI tools. Or, if you ask it a question like do a security analysis of my buckets, it'll run away and ask 15 questions in the time that I would have pecked to write my first SQL query. It probably brings me more joy than it does Bob writing SQL queries, but it's still, I'd rather be asking questions and getting answers. So it's a complete change to the way you end up interacting with the infrastructure. It makes it way, way, way more accessible for everybody because you can just ask questions and deal with the responses out the other side. And it goes way beyond the idea of your traditional dashboards or inventory systems or other things which have pre-canned questions or specific ways of doing with it. Because now you're just having a conversation with it about what you want. You can ask follow-up questions and deal with it. And it's just transformational in how you end up working with your infrastructure. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it's incredible for exploration, for ideation.
Right.
I thought one of the other cool features is that you could see all the thinking history. So
Right.
if you wanted to almost validate, like, hey, is this the right approach that it's taking? Can I actually see the results? Can I also see the SQL query behind?
Correct.
It was super important to me.
Yeah.
I have trust issues.
Yeah.
So that was vital to me that I can actually see in detail what it's doing, because often, the AI, just like people, makes mistakes, makes assumptions. And so it's great to see the answer, but personally, I need to investigate how it got there and show your work.
Be able to take that and make it repeatable. So I think, one of the cool features there is like, you could take that SQL and then just hit, run it, and then it brings you to the query editor. Then you can adjust it and take it from there into your normal SteamPipe workflows. And then the inverse, what I was playing with is taking that SQL query back and asking questions back in AI within the chat feature. So I think it's really nice cycle that you can work in with from query to chat. So
I think there's a good balance there. There is huge value in being able to just ask a question and get a response. There's also huge value in deterministic, opinionated responses. And I think we already had the latter, and I think that the chat adds, the ability for you to kind of interact with it in a more, ad hoc way. To your point, Bob, those things, you can connect those things. You can determine how the deterministic thing is working and get an explanation. Likewise, you can ask a general question and then get to the repeatable response that you may want to use.
One of the default models that we're using at the moment is, included as part of the license is the GPT-5 Mini. I think that actually works pretty good for what it is, but to take it to a higher model, you could bring your own key for OpenAI or for Anthropic Claude. And that gives you kind of a different experience. Is there anything that just opened up to the group? Is there anything that you guys thought was interesting in kind of playing with the different models or the type of questions that you've been asking?
The different models provide different levels of quality of result that is in proportion to what they cost generally. It's not really a surprise. I was a little surprised that some of the smaller models were quite good with most responses. Like the GPT-5 Mini is an inexpensive model, and it generally provides good results. Great answers to simple questions, good enough answers to more complex questions. Now, if you up level and you go to GPT-5 or you go to Claude Sonnet. A generalized question like, hey, analyze my AWS network security infrastructure. You're going to get a much better response for that than you would with something like GPT-5, and you're going to pay for it, of course. So there's a big difference in the quality of the models, and that's the difference in what they cost, largely. The other thing I found a little interesting in the implementation is the ability of the model to follow our instructions in terms of how to format the response so we can make sense of it are also impacted by it. So it's a little tricky sometimes to get consistent results across all the models in order just for us to consume it in the way that we want to on the back end.
The power of the SQL and the introspection and stuff in that iterative model flow for getting things done, like it works so great because SQL, it understands so well. And then it can ask questions of the database. Oh, did I get the column wrong? Oh, wait, just let me retry that, which is, what we all do when we're doing that stuff. But because the universe of Steampipe tables and stuff is so large, right? Like, I mean, hundreds and hundreds or thousands of them if you've got a few plugins installed. Like, that's a lot of context that you'd have to chew up and swallow and everything. But because introspect, it can just work through to those answers, check things out, explore on its own. And so having the deterministic thing John was talking about before, but being able to be called from the AI is just so powerful and just, has turned into a massive benefit of us building on that technology for sure. And I think AI just unleashes a whole other level of it beyond what you'll see when it knows less about your weird query language or whatever it might be.
It's super impressive, the quality of our chat feature on top of our existing foundation. So yeah, excited for the community to start using it, giving us feedback, seeing what questions they're gonna ask. On Thursday was a Guardrails announcement, and so the big thing there is actually kind of almost like what we did with pipes in terms of just kind of rethinking some of the ways that our controls are evaluating, and it led to a huge performance benefit as well as a simpler UI. And so, John, this was an architectural shift for us where Guardrails was in this like evaluate everything all the time to now like evaluating what matters. Can you give just some background on why this type of shift in thinking and how Guardrails works?
Essentially, when you create a policy setting and you apply it somewhere, it will create policy values and compute them individually for each resource underneath that's targeted by the policy, and then the controls likewise with the controls. Each control also has a primary policy generally, which basically dictates the behavior of the control. One of those behaviors is skip, which just basically means it's off, right? And so all of that stuff is stored in the database. And so by not materializing the things that have no setting and are skipped by default, we don't have to add all of those entries in on the back end, which greatly shrinks the size of the data that has to be searched and filtered every time you look for a policy value or control, etc. And so it just drastically reduces the amount of items to look through and thus increases the performance and shrinks the size of those tables in the database. Most customers don't have most controls on. They only have a subset of them on, so it doesn't make sense to compute all those values. The side effect that too is that from a user perspective, we're able to focus in the interface more visibility around the things that you have configured, which by definition are the things that are important to you, and less on the ones that you have not yet enabled. So it's about kind of reducing the noise, both in terms of the storage and the compute and all the stuff on the back end, and also the noise in terms of the user's cognitive load and seeing what's configured in their environment.
Yeah, super impressive in terms of the benefits, and that that shift is just fundamentally important because our enterprises have millions of controls under management, for millions of resources. So it's constantly scaling. These environments are getting much larger, and with that, we're keeping up with that scale. On every Friday, we also talk about our B-sides. It's everything that we could not fit into the week in its own day. And so if you guys have not checked out B-sides, please look through, goes through all of our products and all the latest features and announcements that didn't make the cut, as well as community contributions and thanking and calling out our community members for what they contributed. There is so much to talk about, but we're also trying to keep the wrap party pretty tight. One of the things I really enjoyed seeing was in Guardrails, Amazon Bedrock mod was introduced. And just like I mean, we support hundreds of resource types within Amazon, Bedrock just being one of them. And with our common guardrails of tracking to see what's active, what approved configurations, tagging, making sure things are encrypted, they're not publicly accessible, common themes across. We also then introduced to Amazon Bedrock controls, and we're starting to see more and more enterprises not just adopt AI, but also the AI services within Amazon, Azure, and Google. And so it's great to see some of these customer voice of customer feedback come through, and us adding in the Amazon governance controls for Bedrock. So excited to see that, excited to see our customers adopt AI more and us being able to provide controls for them. So I know there's a lot here, but maybe we'll just focus on the community contributions. Nathan, you're very active in the community along with the rest of the product team. A ton of great contributions. We're so thankful for the community contributing back. Is there maybe one or a few that you wanted to call out, something that really stuck to you on what someone contributed?
First one is probably, it was great to see Theo really embrace the Cloudflare plugin for Steam Pipes. Sort of, you can see him almost make it his own. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm adding this table, I'm improving this, I'm doing this, and worked really closely with Ed and the team to get those changes in, all, out there, and took that plugin from, good to great, I would think, which was just fantastic seeing someone run with it. And it's just so easy once you get in the zone of doing those things that I can imagine. I've built a bunch of plugins myself, and it's really fun. So it's nice to see someone just run with that. Obviously has a lot of stuff going on in Cloudflare and a lot of things to query. So that was fantastic. The other comment I just want to make is we're all really enjoying like just the sheer number of contributions that come through from so many different people at this point. Like, so many plugins get contributions tables or an issue suggested or a PR created, and then mods like, oh, there's a bug in this query or this control, or fix this or add that. Like, it's just everywhere now. The contributions coming through consistent, great. And I also want to give a shout out to our team, who I think do a really fantastic job of working with the community on that. I was over at Forward CloudSec in Berlin last week, meeting with a whole bunch of people who really love our stuff, which was so great to hear. But the constant thing they kept saying is, oh, wow, your community is so great to work with. Everybody's so responsive and helpful and giving me answers. And so, that was just a really proud moment for me as well. And I think that's reflected in the fact that people keep coming back and doing more, right? And as we do that, these plugins and these mods are getting so battle hardened and tested at this point and proven at this point that there's nothing like it. That it's fantastic to see it coming together.
100%. Well, and that is a wrap for this launch week 10. Looking forward to another great launch week coming up in a few months with launch week 11. Thank you all for joining us for this wrap party, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.